Welcome to Facts Radio, your journey through history begins here. In this episode, we explore the rise and fall of Napoleon, genius, ambition, and downfall of an empire builder. Close your eyes and let the candle smoke of 2 centuries curl around you. Hear the thunder of 400,000 boots crossing the Niemen. Taste the brass of cannon smoke on a wind that once carried the voice of a 28-year-old general crying, "Forward, for France, for glory, for destiny." We begin on a storm-lit rock in the Mediterranean where a boy no one wanted learns to want everything. Chapter 1: The Island That Cast a Shadow. Corsica, 1769. Jagged peaks tear the sky like torn parchment. Olive trees shiver in a wind that smells of myrtle and gunpowder, for this island has never truly surrendered, not to Genoa, not to France, not to any master. In a stone house in Ajaccio, Maria Letizia Bonaparte clenches her teeth through another contraction. The midwife's oil lamp gutters, outside, French dragoons patrol the narrow streets, fresh reminders that the island's independence died only months earlier. When the infant wails, small, fierce, almost angry to be alive, the mother whispers a name that means the lion's wrath in Old Corsican, Napoleon. Imagine the tension in that room. A conquered people, a proud family, a child born under foreign banners. The father, Carlo, a minor noble who switches allegiance as easily as changing coats, will soon hustle his brood to the French mainland for scholarships and sinecures. But the boy will never forget the scent of marquee shrubs on Corsican hillsides or the sound of his elders plotting revenge around smoky hearths. By age 9 he is shipped to Brienne-le-Château, a snow-blown military school where aristocratic French boys mock his accent, his manners, his very existence. He retreats into mathematics, into maps, into the clockwork certainty of numbers that do not care whether you speak Parisian French or Corsican Italian. At night he writes essays on the futility of courage without discipline, papers his teachers file away, uneasy at the chill precision of the prose. Years compress like a musket spring. The revolution erupts in 1789, and Lieutenant Bonaparte watches from artillery posts as Paris tears itself apart. He sees the Tuileries stormed, sees the king's Swiss guard slaughtered in flower beds, smells the sour copper of blood mixing with rain. While other officers tremble, he calculates angles of fire, trajectories of grapeshot. In the siege of Toulon, 1793, he is given one chance: point the guns, silence the British fleet, reclaim the port. Picture the young man striding along the ramparts at dusk, coat flapping, eyes glowing with the cold fire of a mathematician who suddenly holds life and death variables. The fortifications fall. At 24 he is promoted brigadier general. Robespierre's brother shakes his hand, Paris salons whisper about the Corsican meteor. Yet meteors burn. When Robespierre tumbles, Napoleon is arrested, briefly, absurdly, because his name appeared on a list of favorites. He spends anxious nights in a cell overlooking the Seine, listening to the city's bells argue with each other. Freedom comes with a shrug, but the lesson remains: in revolutionary France, yesterday's hero is tomorrow's suspect. He drifts, half forgotten, until October 1795 when royalist mobs march on the National Convention. Politicians scramble for a savior. Enter the slight, sallow general with a plan: place cannon at the entrances to the Tuileries, load with canister, fire at point-blank range. The whiff of grapeshot clears the streets in minutes, leaves 1,400 dead, and catapults Napoleon into the pantheon of indispensables. He is rewarded with command of the army of Italy, an underfed, bootless rabble posted to the Alps for morale theatre more than military purpose. On the eve of departure he visits Josephine de Beauharnais, a Creole widow whose salon smells of rosewater and political opportunism. She laughs at his provincial earnestness. He writes her feverish letters from every posting: "Since I left you I have been constantly depressed. My happiness is to be near you. Incessantly I live over in my memory your caresses, words that will one day be quoted in every language the emperor's armies touch." They marry in a civil ceremony so rushed the groom arrives 2 hours late, having signed the wrong register at the mayor's office. The next morning he races south to take command, already drafting the first proclamation that will make his soldiers believe they are wolves in rags. Imagine the frostbitten dawn. When the new commander rides along the ranks. He dismounts, grabs a rusted musket, shows the men how to fix bayonets with frozen fingers. From today, he cries, you will have everything, boots, bread, glory. They cheer less from conviction than from hunger, yet something in his voice slices deeper than rhetoric. Within weeks he has them sweeping Austrian outposts from the Ligurian Alps, living off captured supplies, marching 25 miles a day. Every victory is announced to Paris in bulletins so vivid citizens can taste alpine snow on their tongues. Napoleon becomes a household god before he is 27. It's hard to believe, but the boy who once hid in Corsican marquee now dictates terms to kings. At Lodi, he personally leads the charge across a burning bridge, eyes fixed on Austrian guns spewing death at 50 paces. The French follow, not because they love him yet, but because they cannot bear to be seen hesitating by the small general who refuses to duck. When the smoke clears, he walks among corpses, notebook in hand, recording how many rounds it took to silence each enemy piece, data for the next battle, and the next. That night he writes Josephine, I have tasted the first fruits of destiny, they are bitter, but I want more. Chapter 2, Crossing the Bridge of Lightning. Italy becomes a stage and Napoleon its sole actor. In a whirlwind 12 months he wins 18 battles, negotiates the Treaty of Campo Formio, and redrafts the map of Europe as casually as sketching fortifications on a tavern table. The French Directory, a corrupt committee of lawyers and speculators, watches uneasily. They need victories, but not victors too popular to control. They order him to England, an impossible invasion, hoping the Channel storms finish what conspiracies cannot. Instead, Napoleon proposes Egypt, strike at Britain's eastern jugular, cut the route to India, wrap himself in the romance of Alexander and Caesar. The politicians agree, relieved to export their problem 2,000 miles away. Picture the port of Toulon, May 1798. 300 transports sway under a sky the color of pewter. Scientists, Monge, Berthollet, 41 scholars in all, climb gangplanks alongside 35,000 soldiers. They carry crates of instruments, printing presses, a library of 2,000 volumes, even a balloon for aerial reconnaissance. Napoleon strides the deck of Lorient, a 120-gun floating palace, coat billowing like a flag no one has invented yet. At sunset the fleet slips anchor, sails glowing blood-red. He stands at the rail, murmuring lines from Ossian, imagining pyramids, crocodiles, the sand-heavy breath of antiquity. Behind him France fades, ahead lies myth. Malta falls in 3 days. Knights in ostrich-plumed helmets surrender a fortress they vowed to defend with their lives. Napoleon simply promises them pensions. Southeast again, the convoy crawls across a Mediterranean blazing with mirage. Sailors see continents that aren't there, soldiers dream of mummies walking on water. On July 1st they sight Egypt, a ochre ribbon shimmering like forged metal. Alexandria's medieval walls crumble under French artillery within hours. The city smells of cloves, dust, and stagnant canals. Napoleon issues proclamations in Arabic, claiming liberation from Mamluk tyrants. Few locals can read, fewer trust invaders who drink wine and wear tight blue trousers. The Battle of the Pyramids, July 21st. 10,000 Mamluk cavalry, warriors in chain mail, wielding jeweled sabers, charge straight into French squares. Imagine the sun a white coin hammered onto blue steel, the air vibrating with kettle drums and Quranic chants. Napoleon, on horseback in the center square, waits until the last second, then orders volley fire at 200 paces. The effect is industrial, horses somersault, riders vanish in red mist. Within an hour the Mamluk army ceases to exist. Soldiers, he declares, from the height of these pyramids, 40 centuries look down upon you. The sentence is so perfect historians suspect he rehearsed it weeks earlier, but the troops believe history is watching, and remember. Yet glory unravels faster than silk. On August 1st, Admiral Nelson finds the French fleet anchored at Abuka Bay. Night falls, the sea becomes a lake of fire. Lorient explodes in a raw herd 50 miles away, showering the decks of enemy ships with burning ledgers and fragments of Mozart scores. 3,000 sailors die. Napoleon watches from the beach, face lit orange by detonations. The Egyptian campaign is now a prison. He marches inland, takes Cairo, establishes an institute where scholars discuss electricity and hieroglyphs while rats gnaw the corpses outside. Plague arrives, sandstorms erase roads, men whisper that the general has led them into a tomb. In February 1799 he strikes east toward Syria. Picture columns snaking across the Sinai under a sky like hammered brass. At Jaffa he storms walls, then orders 3,000 Turkish prisoners shot on the beach to conserve rations. When plague breaks out in his own ranks, he walks among the sick, touching fevered foreheads, promising relief his doctors cannot give. Some say compassion, others note the gesture guarantees loyalty of survivors. At Acre, British gunners and determined defenders repulse every assault. For 2 months he hurls battalions against stone, watches ladders collapse into surf-dyed crimson. Finally, he retreats, leaving behind a note, "I leave Acre, but I will return like the tide." The tide, history will record, never comes back. News from Europe is dire, a second coalition pushes French armies beyond the Rhine, Italy is lost, the Directory totters. Napoleon decides on the unthinkable, abandon his army, race to Paris. In August 1799 he slips aboard a frigate with a handful of aides, leaving Kleber to govern Egypt. Imagine the night departure, moonlight carves silver scars on the waves, the general stands silent, cloak wrapped tight, already composing the speech that will convince France he never really left. After 47 days at sea, dodging British squadrons, he lands at Frejus. 1,000 citizens greet him, within days 10,000 chant his name in Lyon. The prodigal general has returned, trailing Oriental mystique and the scent of gunpowder still clinging to his coat. Paris, October 1799. The government bankrupt, inflation rampant, royalists and Jacobins plot in every alley. Sieyes, the cerebral priest who thinks constitutions like chess moves, seeks a sword. He finds it in the 30-year-old with desert sun still tanning his skin. Together they craft the coup of 18 Brumaire. Troops occupy the chambers, deputies flee through windows, the republic dies in a dim hall smelling of wax and fear. By dawn France has 3 consuls, within weeks Napoleon is first consul, the antique title of Roman dictators echoing like a drumbeat. He moves into the Tuileries, sleeps in the bed once occupied by Marie Antoinette, and dreams of pyramids that refuse to crumble. Chapter 3, The Consul Who Crowned Himself. Power, Napoleon learns, is not a pyramid but a kaleidoscope, every turn reveals new patterns of threat. Royalists plot assassination, Jacobin scheme resurrection, Britain bankrolls continental armies, the treasury is an echo chamber. He attacks on multiple fronts, creates the Bank of France, standardizes the franc, signs the Concordat with the Pope, suddenly priests preach obedience to Napoleon in the same breath as Christ. Imagine Notre Dame, April 1802, incense clouds coil beneath Gothic vaults while the first consul receives communion from Pius VII. Outside, Parisians cheer the man who legalized Catholicism without returning church lands. He exits the cathedral under a rain of white petals, already thinking 2 moves ahead. The Treaty of Amiens, March 1802, pauses the European war long enough for British tourists to flood Paris, gawking at the general who now rides a white charger along the Champs-Élysées. He inspects every detail, pavement stones, theatre programs, hat brims of policemen. At St. Cloud he receives foreign diplomats beneath ceilings painted by David, the painter who also depicts him crossing Alps he never truly crossed on a rearing stallion. David's canvas is propaganda in oils, Napoleon studies it, requests the cloak be made redder. Meanwhile he orders construction of roads, canals, lycées, public schools designed to mint citizens loyal to the state, not regional dialects. The Legion of Honor is born, a secular chivalry rewarding talent over birth. Veterans pin the tiny cross to threadbare coats and weep at the notion that courage can outlive titles. Yet peace is a brittle varnish. Britain and France trade insults over Malta, colonial press freedoms, the very definition of neutrality. By May 1803 the guns speak again. Napoleon assembles 150,000 men at Boulogne, the Army of England, and builds a flotilla of flat-bottomed boats intended to swarm across the channel like water beetles. He reviews troops on cliffs where white caps gnaw the rocks below, promising boots will soon splash onto Kentish beaches. Imagine the morning fog so thick soldiers hear the channel breathing. But the Royal Navy tightens its blockade, admirals declare every French harbour a prison. Napoleon paces the ramparts, dictating memoranda on ship designs, sail ratios, tide tables, an artilleryman trying to bend the sea like a siege gun. Inside France, conspiracies bloom. Royalist agent Cadoodle, British banknote stitched in his coat lining, recruits a Bourbon prince. On Christmas Eve 1804 they nearly succeed, 22 bombs along Napoleon's route to the opera. Instead of cancelling, he orders the coachman to drive faster, arrive splattered with mud but intact. The next day police arrest hundreds, drums beat through the night. It is the final argument he needs to transform consulate into empire. Senators, tribunes, even former revolutionaries file past his desk, begging him to place France above faction by becoming hereditary monarch. He pretends hesitation, then acceptance. Picture the mirror at St. Cloud. He practices placing a golden laurel on his own head, tilting it slightly to achieve the Roman silhouette David recommends. December 2, 1804. Notre Dame transformed into a theatre of purple velvet and candle fire. The Pope travels from Rome, expecting to crown another medieval vassal. Instead, Napoleon takes the diadem from Pius's hands and lifts it himself. Gasps ripple the nave, the gesture proclaims power derived from people and victory, not heaven. Beside him stands Josephine, trembling in a gown seeded with 3,000 diamonds that refract the candlelight like shattered rainbows. When the organ swells, Bonaparte becomes Napoleon I, Emperor of the French. Outside, cannon thunder, in taverns across Paris, veterans toast with watered wine, uncertain whether they fought a revolution only to birth an empire. The coins already bear his profile, laurel-crowned, eyes staring into futures only he can see. The coronation night he does not celebrate. He sits at a desk, reviewing casualty lists from the Caribbean where 35,000 soldiers died trying to crush the Haitian revolt. Yellow fever devours regiments faster than bullets. He re-legalizes slavery in colonies, undoing revolutionary gains, calculating sugar profits against moral cost. The arithmetic of empire is ruthless. In Europe he redraws the map, crowns brother Louis King of Holland, brother Jerome King of Westphalia, brother-in-law Murat Grand Duke of Berg, dynastic Lego snapping across Germany. Each sibling receives instructions, adopt the Code Napoleon, conscript armies, send revenues to Paris. Blood, he believes, guarantees loyalty better than constitutions. Yet the throne feels drafty. Britain remains unbowed, Austria and Russia stir. In October 1805 he abandons the Boulogne camp, wheels 200,000 men south to face the Third Coalition. Before leaving he strolls the cliffs at sunset, wind whipping his grey greatcoat. He scoops a pebble, flings it into the tide, murmurs, "I'll be back for the rest." The Channel pebble sinks, European history pivots toward Austerlitz. Chapter 4, Son of Austerlitz. The march south is a symphony of logistics, corps move along 100-mile front, supply wagons timed like Swiss clocks, bakers kneading dough at 3 a.m. so soldiers smell fresh bread at dawn. Napoleon travels in a green carriage panelled with bookshelves and folding maps. He dictates 60 letters a day, pausing only to gulp scalding coffee that stains his cuffs. At Strasbourg he reviews troops in a downpour, water streaming from his bicorn yet never dripping on the order sheet he holds, an illusion of control that mesmerizes wet veterans. Imagine the drumbeat of 200,000 boots sinking with heartbeat, the horizon a vibrating wire of destiny. In Germany he executes the battalion car, a rectangular formation designed to confuse enemies about his main thrust. Austrian General Mack encircles Ulm, believing he traps the French, instead he wakes to find French corps at every gate, like wolves circling a pen. On October the 20th, 25,000 Austrians surrender without a major battle. Napoleon writes Paris, "I have destroyed an army by maneuvers, not massacres." Yet the sentence is half-truth. Bavarian villages burn, civilians looted, women assaulted. The Emperor's dispatches edit war into geometry. But naval news shatters triumph. On October 21, off Cape Trafalgar, Nelson annihilates the combined French-Spanish fleet, ending forever the dream of invasion across the Channel. When Courier reaches headquarters, Napoleon is dictating orders for a parade. He reads the dispatch, face unreadable, then folds it into a paper boat and floats it on a basin of washwater. "We must conquer the land," he says quietly. No one dares mention the sea again. Austerlitz, December 2nd, 1805, anniversary of his coronation. Dawn fog thick as wool blankets the Pratzen heights. Russian and Austrian emperors stand atop the ridge, 85,000 strong, convinced the French are retreating. Napoleon has deliberately weakened his right, luring them forward. Imagine the sun breaking through at 9 a.m., exactly as he predicted the night before while studying wind charts with his astronomer. French artillery unmask, 139 guns speak in unison, the hillside erupting in geysers of earth and flesh. Voila the son of Austerlitz, he murmurs, coining a phrase that will gild schoolbooks for a century. By 4 p.m. the Allied center collapses, soldiers slide downhill on frost-slick grass, pursued by cavalry sabres. French losses, 9,000. Enemy, 27,000 plus 180 cannon abandoned in the mud. Francis of Austria offers an armistice, Alexander of Russia rides east, tears freezing on his cheeks. On the field at night, lanterns flicker over heaps of white-cloaked Russian guardsmen. Napoleon walks among them, cloak hem soaked in blood, dictating a bulletin that begins, "Soldiers, I am content with you." It is the first time he uses the imperial I instead of the familiar we. The subtle shift signals that empire now rests on his person alone. The Treaty of Pressburg ends the war, Austria cedes Venice, Tyrol, Swabia, pays 40 million francs. Europe redrawn again, Napoleon creates the Confederation of the Rhine, dissolving the 1,000-year Holy Roman Empire. In Paris he orders construction of the Arc de Triomphe, 50 meters high, every general's name carved in stone, except those who displeased him. Imagine masons chiseling while crowds cheer, no one asks if marble can outlast resentment. Yet victory seeds future defeat. Prussia, humiliated by secret clauses, arms for revenge. Russia withdraws but broods over broken alliances. Britain, untouched on her island, opens the treasury to fund a 4th, 5th, 6th coalition. And inside the emperor's own tent, exhaustion gnaws. He sleeps for hours, ulcers flare, handwriting shrinks. Letters to Josephine grow curt, "You must come to Munich, I need you." She delays, dallies with younger officers. When she finally arrives, he smells perfume not his own, says nothing, but the next day orders the army to march at 5 a.m. instead of 7. The war machine compensates for a wounded heart. It's hard to believe, but the man who could time sunrise to the minute cannot stop dusk gathering in his marriage. Still, he presses on, drafting constitutions for satellite kingdoms, planning canals, universities, a code that will outlive him. In the carriage at Brunn he sketches a design for a tomb in Paris, telling aide-de-camp, "I would prefer the Seine to the Danube, but destiny chooses rivers." He laughs, yet the laugh cracks, metallic. Outside, snow begins to fall, soft as forgiveness, erasing footprints of 200,000 men who followed the son of Austerlitz toward an horizon already darkening with the clouds of future winters. Chapter 5, The Iron Crown of Lombardy. Milan, spring 1806. Dawn fog slides off the Po like liquid iron while cannons boom a 101-gun salute that rattles stained glass saints in the Duomo. Inside, Napoleon waits beneath vaults frescoed with apostles, but the only gospel today is power. He steps forward, lifts the iron crown, reportedly forged from a nail of the true cross, and places it on his own head, intoning the old Lombard formula, "God gave it to me, woe to him who touches it." The gesture is part coronation, part warning. Kingship now travels in his saddlebags, ready to be unpacked on any throne that fits his frontier. The Kingdom of Italy is born, stretching from Venice to the Adriatic, minting coins stamped with his profile and the legend Napoleon, King of Italy. He drafts 40,000 Italians into new regiments, teaches them French drill, rewards bravery with crosses struck from Austrian silver. Imagine regimental bands marching under chestnut blossoms, drummers wearing epaulets still smelling of Parisian tailor shops, Europe's map rewritten to the beat of a single snare. Yet each new conscription pushes resentment into the soil like seeds that will sprout later under different skies. Back in Paris he redesigns the city, carving boulevards wide enough for cannon to fire grapeshot at barricades that do not yet exist. The Louvre becomes the Napoleon Museum, stuffed with art looted from Rome, Vienna, Amsterdam, statues arrive packed in straw, their marble eyes staring at crates labeled, property of the French nation. When architects protest that the palace corridors overflow, he shrugs, a throne room should feel crowded with glory. Workers finish the Arc de Triomphe enough for troops to parade beneath, though scaffolding lingers like a promise no one is sure he can keep. In Warsaw, December 1806, he meets Maria Waleska, a blonde countess married to a man 4 times her age. Picture a ballroom lit by 2,000 candles, mazurkas swirling, and the emperor standing apart, eyes tracking the one woman who refuses to approach him. She finally curtsies, murmurs in halting French, "Sire, Poland hopes in you." That night he writes Josephine a polite letter, then burns it. Instead he drafts orders for a Polish legion, knowing hearts are easier to annex than kingdoms. Within weeks he and Maria ride through snow-dusted parks, breath mingling, rumors racing ahead of hoofbeats. The affair produces a son, Alexandre, born discreetly in a Parisian suburb, another heir in a ledger already worrying the emperor. Meanwhile Britain tightens the noose, blockading ports from Hamburg to Trieste. Napoleon counters with the continental system, Europe's first attempt at economic union, every port closed to British goods, every customs officer armed with imperial decrees. Smugglers adapt like water around stones, barrels of Jamaican coffee roll ashore in Calais under moonlight, bribes jingling in coat pockets. French gendarmes seize English textiles in Lyon warehouses, pile them high, torch them, the flames light faces of weavers now unemployed by shortage of cotton. Imagine the acrid smoke carrying the scent of global war into alpine valleys where peasants have never seen the sea yet starve by its edicts. At Tilsit, June 1807, he meets Tsar Alexander on a raft anchored in the Niemen River, neutral water chosen so neither emperor steps on enemy soil. They embrace like actors who know the audience watches from both banks. Over 2 days of candlelit talks they redraw Europe. Prussia loses half her territory, Poland becomes a French duchy, Russia joins the boycott of Britain. To celebrate, they raft downstream at sunset, champagne corks popping, while onshore 300,000 soldiers cheer across divided camps. It's hard to believe, but the world now balances on a plank bobbing in a Polish river, 2 emperors toasting with crystal that could shatter and spill war back into the cup. Victory breeds dreams too large for daylight. Napoleon begins to toy with Spain, a kingdom rotted by court intrigue and ripe for liberation. He summons Spanish royals to Bayonne for family counseling, then forces both king and crown prince to abdicate, installing brother Joseph on a throne warmed by centuries of Bourbon backs. Madrid erupts in the Dos de Mayo uprising, civilians armed with knives and frying pans charging French muskets. Goya will later paint the executions, faceless French firing squads, Spanish patriots with fists clenched even in death. Napoleon, far away in Paris, reads the dispatch, taps his finger on the casualty column, murmurs, "A storm in a teacup," unaware the teacup is Europe's largest empire and the storm will drown 300,000 Frenchmen. Chapter 6, The Spanish Ulcer. Peninsular War, 1808. Picture a land the color of burnt copper where summer wind smells of thyme and gunpowder. French columns march south expecting parade routes, instead they meet sharpshooters crouched behind olive trunks, priests swinging crucifixes like battle axes, women pouring boiling water from balconies. Every village becomes a fortress, every convent an arsenal. Supply lines stretch like rubber bands until they snap, mule trains vanish in moonlit ambushes, their drivers found with throats cut ear to ear. The emperor's finest troops learn to sleep with cartridge boxes under their heads, ears tuned for the click of flintlock hammers that sound different in foreign tongues. At Bayonne, 18,000 French soldiers surrender, the first time a French field army capitulates since Revolutionary Wars. News races across Europe faster than courier horses, Berlin coffeehouses toast Spanish guerrillas, London prints satirical cartoons of Napoleon slipping on Andalusian olives. The emperor cannot believe the figures, he crumples the dispatch, paces his study until dawn, then decides to go himself. In November 1808 he enters Spain at the head of 250,000 veterans, the largest army he has led since Austerlitz. They sweep forward like a steel broom, retake Madrid in a day, chase English forces under Sir John Moore to Corunna where the British evacuate under moonlight, leaving their dead general wrapped in a cloak. Victory, again, seems inevitable. Yet the land itself resists. French garrisons hole up in stone fortresses, eat rats when supply convoys fail, scratch graffiti that reads "Spain swallows armies." Guerrillas invent a new calendar of cruelty, severed ears stuffed in sacks, priests hanged with rosaries, French paymasters castrated and left to bleed. The emperor issues decrees promising amnesty, the replies are heads of French officers delivered in fruit baskets. Imagine a young drummer boy stationed in Aragon, writing home by candlestub, "Mother, the night here is so black it erases the moon." 2 weeks later his letter arrives stained with someone else's blood, no signature left to read. Napoleon cannot stay forever, Austria stirs again. He races back to Paris, leaving marshals to wage a war without fronts. Over the next 5 years Spain becomes a bleeding ulcer, sucking 300,000 men and 700 million francs, treasure that could have built fleets, universities, whole new cities. Meanwhile Joseph, the bibliophile king, tries to rule from Madrid, issues enlightened edicts abolishing the Inquisition, establishing free press. The Spanish reply by torching his ministries. He retreats to a country palace, reads novels while artillery thuds in the distance, wondering how brotherly love became a crown of thorns. Back in Paris, the emperor faces a colder enemy, time. He needs an heir, but Josephine's age and earlier liaisons make childbirth impossible. He walks the Tuileries gardens at night, boots crunching gravel, weighing dynasty against desire. Finally he summons courage and tells her they must divorce. She collapses, clutching his coat, sobbing so hard the golden bees embroidered on the collar tear loose. The next day she dons imperial jewels for the last time, attends a ceremony where both pretend the break is mutual. Senators praise their sacrifice for France, while violinists struggle to keep tempo through tears. Within months Napoleon negotiates a marriage with Marie-Louise, 18-year-old Habsburg princess, niece of Marie Antoinette, an irony Paris whispers but dares not voice aloud. The wedding is proxy first, by proxy in Vienna, Archduke Charles stands in for the groom, slipping a ring on a girl who has never seen Paris but already hates its reputation. When she finally crosses the Rhine, Napoleon meets her in a lavender coat, attempts charm by speaking German with a thick Corsican accent. She laughs, partly from nerves, partly from the ridiculous sight of the most feared man alive mispronouncing Kaiser. Their first night produces the desired outcome, a son. Napoleon Francois Joseph Charles, born March 20, 1811, greeted by 101 cannon shots that crack windows in villages 30 miles from Paris. The emperor cradles the infant, eyes shining, whispering a king is born. He does not yet know the boy will die in Austrian exile, his only kingdom the fantasy of what might have been. Chapter 7, Frozen Empires. Russia, 1812. The Niemen River glimmers under a June sun so bright it seems polished by destiny. On the western bank 400,000 men, French, Poles, Prussians, Italians, Bavarians, even Swiss, await the signal. Napoleon rides to the water's edge, dismounts, scoops a handful of liquid silver, murmurs, "If I cross this river, it is for the good of the world." No one asks who appointed him custodian of the globe, they only see the eagle standard dip, hear the brass band strike up La Victoire est un nous, and step into the current that reaches their knees like the chill hand of caution. By nightfall they are on Russian soil, chasing shadows that retreat deeper into forests older than Europe itself. The march begins as a parade, wheat fields trampled into avenues of gold dust, villages offering bread and salt, officers dining on porcelain carried in personal carriages. Smolensk burns rather than surrenders, French troops enter walls still spitting sparks, find icons glowing red-hot in the rubble. Moscow looms ahead like a mirage of onion domes. At Borodino, September 7, 250,000 men clash in a valley where the grass is so thoroughly erased that tomorrow it will be called the Field of 40,000. Napoleon watches from a knoll, hesitating to throw in his elite guard, reserving tomorrow for a battle that never comes. By dusk 70,000 lie dead or maimed, the road to Moscow opens, but victory tastes of copper and smoke. They enter Moscow at noon, September 14, to find streets deserted, windows shuttered like closed eyes. That night the first fires ignite, whether by Russian arson or French looters, history cannot decide. Within hours the city becomes a crucible, domes collapse in showers of sparks, libraries float ash into the sky, 1,000 years of icons burn with a smell of pine and incense. Napoleon moves into the Kremlin, sits at a table where Ivan the Terrible once dined, writes decrees no one will obey. Outside, bells crash from towers, their bronze voices melting mid-peal. Imagine the emperor standing on a balcony at 3 a.m., cloak glowing ember red, dictating orders for winter quarters while the wind carries embers that singe his hair. Moscow waits, but Alexander does not negotiate. Days stretch into weeks, the emperor paces empty palaces, plays chess against himself, moves pieces representing armies that are already disintegrating. October 19th, he orders retreat. The Grande Army exits through western gates, each soldier loaded with silks, icons, samovars, treasure that will soon weigh more than hope. The first snowflakes drift lazy as white ash, melt on contact, then stay. Within a week the temperature plunges to -30, brandy freezes in canteens, men crack teeth on bread. Horses slip on ice, shatter cannon bones, soldiers slit their bellies to use intestines as makeshift gloves. Imagine a column so long the tail sleeps while the head fights. At the Berezina River, November 26, Russian guns wait on both banks. Engineers throw 2 rickety bridges across black water swirling with ice floes. For 3 days a human torrent crosses under artillery fire, those who fall disappear into the current with a soft click, like pebbles swallowed by night. Napoleon stands on the eastern bank, face grey with fatigue, watching pontoon planks catch fire from exploding shells. He mutters, "I am the avalanche, not the man," words his scribe records but cannot decipher. When the rear guard finally torches the bridges, 30,000 stragglers are left behind, some surrender, most simply sit in snow and wait for the cold to write the final order. December 5, near Smorgany, he hands command to Murat, boards a sleigh under cover of darkness. The vehicle races west, escort dragoons swapping horses at frozen post stations where breath hangs like crystal. In Paris, 3 weeks later, he steps from carriage at 11 p.m., face gaunt but eyes fever bright. Ministers gasp, the newspapers had reported him still at the front. He summons the Senate next morning, announces, "The army I commanded no longer exists, but France will rise again." Outside, snow falls on the Tuileries garden, each flake a ghost of 400,000 who will never march home. The empire survives the winter, but somewhere in Russian snow the emperor's aura lies frozen beside abandoned eagles, waiting for thaw. Chapter 8, Nations Awaken. 1813, the War of Liberation. Prussia rises first, its universities closing so students can enlist, professors drilling beside farm boys in fields where drill masters shout in French-accented German they now reject. The Battle of Leipzig, nations call it the Battle of Nations, looms like a gathering storm over Saxony. Napoleon scrapes together 200,000 troops, French veterans still loyal, Polish lancers who fear Russian retribution, teenage conscripts who have never shaved. Across the field 300,000 allies form, Russians with faces carved from birch, Austrians hesitant but determined, Swedes led by Bernadotte, once a marshal who wore the eagle, now a crown prince who wants to unpin it. Imagine the plains white with frost, artillery wheels creaking like glacier on the move. October 16th, cannon open at dawn, the roar so continuous it seems the earth itself is clearing its throat. For 3 days the front twists like a wounded serpent, villages changing hands until their names, Watchow, Liebertwolkwitz, become synonyms for slaughter. Napoleon rides along batteries, coat riddled with spent musket balls that look like black flies. When Saxon troops defect mid-battle, turning guns against the French, he watches without expression, then orders cavalry to charge the very men who yesterday saluted him. By nightfall October 19th, the bridge behind his lines is blown too early, stranding 30,000 regard on the wrong bank. They surrender, weep, toss eagles into the Elster River where standards sink like bleeding birds. Retreat becomes a hemorrhage. French columns slog west through mud that sucks boots from feet, past villages where windows slam shut yet rifle barrels poke out. Bavaria switches sides, opening the road to France itself. Napoleon dictates orders at 3 a.m. by candle stubs, fingers trembling not from cold but from the arithmetic of shrinking battalions. In Paris, newspapers speak of strategic redeployment, but mothers recognize the hollowness in official phrasing. The emperor races ahead of his army, reaches the Rhine at Mainz, turns to see only 60,000 ragged shadows following, men who once marched to Moscow and back, now marching to an idea called France that keeps shrinking in the dawn. At Fontainebleau, March 1814, he confronts the Senate's ultimatum, abdicate or see Paris occupied. Senators who once cheered his coronation now speak of constitutional necessity, their voices echoing in halls where Napoleonic eagles still glare from tapestries. He walks the balcony overlooking the courtyard where the old guard stands in perfect ranks, bearskins brushing low branches of April buds. Soldiers, he begins, then pauses, throat working. For once words fail, he simply lowers his head, the bicorn shielding eyes that will not cry in public. The next day he signs the abdication, exchanges the purple of empire for the black coat of exile. The treaty grants him Elba, a toy island between Corsica and Italy, sovereignty over 12,000 souls, fewer than followed him once in a single division. On the road south he opens the carriage window, watches French countryside roll past, fields he turned into conscription lists, rivers into defensive lines, cathedrals into hospitals. A peasant woman by the roadside lifts her skirt in mockery, a veteran salutes with one finger missing. He closes the curtain, murmurs, "They loved me for the thunder, not the rain." At Frejus he boards HMS Undaunted, British sailors staring at the man who nearly bent their island. Off Elba, the ship fires a salute, the sound ricochets off cliffs that will be his walls. When he steps onto Porto Ferrao's quay, townspeople cheer, partly curiosity, partly hope that a fallen star might still shed light. He organizes tiny parades, designs flags, plants mulberry trees, an emperor playing house with leftover glory. But Europe miscalculates. Louis XVIII, restored by foreign bayonets, issues decrees that smell of pre-revolutionary mildew, returning émigrés reclaim forests peasants now call their own. The Congress of Vienna redraws borders with the same enthusiasm children show rearranging toy soldiers. Meanwhile Napoleon watches from Elba, island kingdom smaller than one of his former parade grounds. Letters arrive, some pleading, some plotting, carried by fishermen who slip past British patrols. He calculates, 600 miles to Paris, 600,000 discontented veterans across France, 6 days if he moves fast enough. Imagine the winter night of February 26, 1815, torchlight flickers over 1,100 men crammed into leaky brigantines, eagles wrapped in oilcloth. He boards the Inconstant, whispers, the eagle will fly from peak to peak, and sets course for destiny's second act. Chapter 9, The 100 Days. March 1, 1815. The French Riviera at Golfe-Juan sees dawn the color of pale gunpowder. Boats scrape sand, grenadiers splash ashore, boots sinking into a homeland they last left as conquerors now returning as rebels. Napoleon steps onto the beach, kisses a handful of French soil, pockets it, later he will scatter the grains on Waterloo's mud like a farmer sowing last seed. Columns advance north through the Alps where road signs still point to villages named after his victories. Royalist troops block the route Napoleon at Laffrey. He walks ahead of his men, opens his greatcoat, shouts, "If there is one among you who would kill his emperor, here I am." Muskets waver, then swing upward, soldiers cheer, kiss his coat, march behind the eagle once more. Imagine the telegraph speeding north, Napoleon has landed. Europe's courts drop teacups in unison. Louis XVIII flees Paris in a borrowed coach so hastily that courtiers leave behind slippers embroidered with fleur-de-lis. On March 20 Napoleon enters the capital, crowds packing boulevards so tight that some suffocate against railings. The Tuileries furniture still bears royal warmth, he sits on the same chair Louis vacated hours earlier, feels residual heat, mutters, "Thrones cool quickly." He issues decrees, conscription of 400,000, reorganization of the guard, promises of liberal constitutions wrapped in martial music. The eagle standard, refurbished with fresh gilt, seems to glow from within, an omen or perhaps a furnace preheating its own funeral. Europe responds with a coalition quicker than seasons. Britain, Prussia, Austria, Russia swear no separate peace, amassing 700,000 men. Napoleon races to strike before their gears align. June 15, he crosses into Belgium, 124,000 strong, aiming to drive a wedge between Wellington's Anglo-Allied army and Blücher's Prussians. At Charleroi, troops cheer so loudly that officers fear the enemy will hear morale across the Sambre. He sleeps in an inn whose landlord later sells the bedsheets by the inch. Pilgrims will queue to touch linen that once touched legend. June 16, Ligny. He smashes Blücher's Prussians, sends 16,000 greycoats reeling through dusklit wheat. Cannons thunder so continuously that swallows fall stunned from the sky. Meanwhile Marshal Ney, at Quatre Bras, hesitates against Wellington, losing the chance to sever Allied lines. Napoleon rides through night rain to reunite corps, dictating orders by lightning flashes, each sheet of white light revealing maps now soggy with ink and storm. Imagine the Emperor's face strobed by nature's artillery, eyes calculating angles of attack while thunder sounds like distant drums from Austerlitz calling across years. June 18, Waterloo. Dawn breaks muddy after midnight rain, soldiers sleep in puddles that reflect a pewter sky. Napoleon breakfasts on fried potatoes offered by a peasant woman, jokes that today will be a fine pudding for France. The ground, however, is pudding, artillery sinks to axles, cavalry flounder. He delays the main attack until 11:30, waiting for mud to dry. Some say he suffers hemorrhoids too painful to mount a horse earlier. When the Imperial Guard finally advances in 7,000-strong columns, the slope ahead looks like a green wall topped with red-coated harvest. They climb, drums beating, only to meet British volleys that sound like a single continuous crack. The Guard wavers, breaks, something French veterans have never seen. Imagine the silence that follows, broken by cries of La Garde recule. A sentence that shatters empires. Napoleon rides among fugitives, trying to rally knots of men, but even the eagles seem heavier, their bronze wings unable to lift morale. At 9 p.m. he admits defeat, turns south in a carriage that soon outruns hope. In Paris, legislators waver, he abdicates a second time, this time for his 4-year-old son, a phantom regency that lasts 4 days. The Allies enter Paris in July, restore Louis XVIII, who returns with luggage labelled Second Restoration. Napoleon flees to Rochefort, hoping to sail to America, but British ships block the harbour. On July 15 he boards HMS Bellerophon, walks the deck in a green coat, asks to be received as a soldier, not a sovereign. The captain replies with courtesy colder than cannon iron. Europe banishes him to Saint Helena, a volcanic speck in the South Atlantic 1,200 miles from anywhere, where the world can keep its prisoner under a sky that never heard of eagles. Chapter 10, The Rock at the End of the World. October 1815, Saint Helena. The island rises from the ocean like a black tooth, cliffs ringed by albatross wings wider than hope. Longwood House, his residence, leaks in every rain, floors sprout mold that smells of ship holds and exile. He wanders rooms measuring 14 paces by 12, reenacts campaigns with sugar cubes on the dining table, names each cube after corps that no longer exist. British Governor Sir Hudson Lowe insists on protocol, no letters sealed with imperial bees, no visitors without permission, no speaking to sentries who pretend not to hear. Imagine the man who once moved borders tracing instead the perimeter of a garden 200 yards square, converting flowerbeds into symbolic Austerlitzes where rose thorns stand in for Russian artillery. Time dilutes into humid monotony. He dictates memoirs to Monthlan and Last Cases, voice growing softer but sentences sharper. My reign was too short to do all the good I wished, my downfall too sudden to prevent all the evil I foresaw. He claims he wanted to free Europe's peoples, unify laws, end feudalism, omitting tariffs, censorship, battlefields. Yet the prose is so vivid listeners forget contradiction. Publishers in London and Paris will print every line, turning defeat into literature more durable than victory. Evenings he plays chess with the ship's doctor, always choosing black, always attacking, as though strategy could reverse color of fate. Health declines, gums bleed, legs swell, skin yellows like old parchment. Doctors diagnose hepatitis, cancer, poisoning, history will argue for centuries. He shows visitors a dried crocus from Egypt, a bullet dug from Austerlitz mud, a lock of Josephine's hair turned silver. I have worn every crown, he whispers, but memory is the only one that still fits. On May 5, 1821, sunset stains the South Atlantic blood red. He calls Tete d'armée, head of the army, then falls silent. The clock in the hallway stops, whether by coincidence or a servant's hand, no one repairs it. British officers cover the corpse with a cloak that once bore imperial bees, now stripped of gold thread. He is buried under a willow, far from the Seine, far from the Paris he redesigned yet never truly possessed. Closing summary. Imagine standing tonight on the Pont des Arts in Paris, water lapping stone, city lights flickering like campfires of memory. The bridges Napoleon built still carry lovers who never heard grapeshot, the boulevards he cleared for cannon now host parades of tourists speaking every tongue he once tried to silence. His legend drifts in the air between street lamps, whispers of genius that organized laws, of ambition that redrew borders, of hubris that taught the world a lesson written in bone. We walk those streets carrying pocket-sized empires of ambition, startups that scale like battalions, social feeds that march across time zones, dreams that sometimes forget to ask the cost of victory. History does not absolve, it echoes. The same code Napoleon that ended feudal privilege also silenced newspapers, the same metric system that unified markets rode on supply wagons to burning villages. Every epoch must decide whether genius is license or stewardship, whether ambition serves humanity or devours it. On Saint Helena the emperor learned what common soldiers knew at Bourguignon, that time is the final general, undefeated, punctual, impartial. Yet even defeat concede caution. After Waterloo, Europe experimented with congresses, alliances, early seeds of international law, fragile, flawed, but striving to cage the dogs of war. Listen, somewhere a child in a distant classroom recites the Declaration of the Rights of Man beside a map colored by borders Napoleon once erased. The lesson is not glory, it is responsibility. The sacrifice of 600,000 in Russia, of villagers starved by blockade, of mothers who received no pension asks us to weigh innovation against empathy, speed against consent, charisma against conscience. When we cheer modern leaders who promise swift victories, we hear distant drums from Austerlitz reminding us that every triumph plants the seeds of its own sunset. So let us remember, not to worship, not to condemn, but to recognize the ember within ourselves that could warm a village or burn a continent. May we crown laws instead of men, build bridges instead of empires, and when ambition whispers our name at dawn, may we answer with humility learned on 100 fields where eagles once flew and never returned. In the quiet after the anthem fades, hope for peace remains the bravest campaign of all. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. If you made it this far, you're the reason we keep going. Please subscribe and help us continue sharing these stories with the world.